Comparison of the most painful punishments.
You said something wrong about the church in the Middle Ages, so the Inquisition is after you now. They've used a leather strap to secure a device that looks like a two-way fork with two sharp points on your neck. One of its sides is pushing against your sternum, and the other against your chin. At first, you tried to keep your head up to lessen the pain, but you couldn't stay like this for long. The so-called Heretics Fork wasn't deadly, but made the victim suffer from the tiniest move. However, on the scale of pain based on scientific research, this kind of suffering gets only 27 points out of 140.
Only 27? What the hell is 140?
In this video, you'll find out about the worst kind of torture in the history of humankind. So, viewer discretion.
Yeah, you could just lay down and you'll be fine.
You have at least a few times in your life been subjected to one of the less obvious kinds of torture. It's just that the executioner wasn't persistent enough when tickling you. In ancient China, this was the primary method of punishing delinquents from noble families, since tickles didn't leave any traces of torture on the body. And the victim was able to recover quite fast if the procedure didn't go too far.
I hate being tickled.
In European countries, goats were employed as a torture device. The culprit was tied up, and salty water was poured on their feet to make the animal lick them. What's so bad about that, you might ask? It's just that there's an incredible number of nerve endings in the feet, and the goat's rough tongue would irritate them quite a lot. So, after a few hours, the tickling starts inducing not just laughter, but also painful muscle contractions. You lose virtually all control over your body, which causes extreme stress, anxiety, and exhaustion.
I would hate this.
Moreover, the nerve endings responsible for reacting to tickles also signalize pain. It's just that if we're being tickled for fun, and for a short time, our reaction to stress doesn't go beyond laughter and light sensations in the body.
Mine does. I want to punch him.
For hours. This causes the nervous system such overload that the lightest touch causes unbearable physical pain. Now imagine that it's not your feet being tickled, it's your private parts. In India, interrogation of criminals was accompanied—
Wait, they're tickling my dick? I'd like that. How is that bad? Like, I'm very ticklish on my feet. Yeah, don't be doing that, but you're tickling my balls on my dick? Huh? What? How is that bad?
Accompanied by placing a small bug on the culprit's genitals and covering the insect with a walnut shell so that it didn't escape. The constant irritation of super sensitive areas caused by the bug's movements made the torture unbearable.
Okay, never mind. So you're telling me a bug is eating and sucking my dick? Nah, I wouldn't like that. I've changed my mind.
Very quickly. And the executioners got any confession they wanted.
I've changed my mind.
Eventually, tickle torture would result in death by asphyxiation.
Yo, why does he look like in his face he's just, you know, relieved himself? Yo, this guy likes the bug. This guy's a weirdo. He likes the bug.
The victim developed a throat spasm caused by uncontrollable laughter.
He loves
Other possible outcomes were cardiac arrest or a brain aneurysm provoked by serious stress. Yet on the pain scale, tickle torture got only 32 points since the suffering it brought was mostly psychological.
Right.
This is very similar to the next kind of torture, the Chinese water torture. At first, the person was immobilized, and then cold water would slowly drip onto their face or head. Gradually, the constant skin irritation caused by the drops and splashes would make the nervous system hypersensitive.
What? Just drops?
The inability to move and the wait for the next drop would literally start driving the person insane.
Really?
Maybe you've even seen this torture in movies. Here's the paradox though. There's no proof that it was ever used in China. This kind of torture was first described by an Italian lawyer on the cut.
Yo, I wouldn't, like, how would dropping water, like water drops on your head, torture? What?
Cusp of the 16th century. In the mid-18th century, German and French doctors attempted to use this method to cure mental disorders. Moreover, the very term Chinese water torture came into active use owing to a trick by the legendary Harry Houdini.
Yeah, no, bro, so if I get some water, yeah? If I get some water. Oh my God, I just poured it all over me. Okay, never mind. Forget. Now I'm soaking.
So, does the water drop torture actually work? Since it can look harmless at first glance, a few bloggers have dared to try it out themselves. The water drop torture was also tested by the Mythbusters. All participants knew they were actually perfectly safe and could be freed at any moment.
Is it really
Yet
that
everyone
bad?
went through a hellish experience. At first, the experimenters suffered from cold, thirst, psychological tension, and physical discomfort. Then, their entire bodies started aching, and breathing problems arose. It all ended in a panic and desperate pleas to be released.
That is the worst.
In addition, after this episode, the Mythbusters received an anonymous letter whose authors reportedly found out that the Chinese water torture may cause mental issues that persist for 20 hours. So, on the pain scale, the water drop torture received 40 points, and a huge question as to whether it was actually used.
Yo, chat, I just can't get into my head how water droplets hitting you would, like, torture you more than this and this. It's just water drops. Bro, you go for a shower, you're fine. I don't get it. Wait for it? Bro, just go sleep. Just go sleep.
In practice, at least because it was replaced by much crueler kinds of water torture. One of them was the Swedish drink. This name was invented by the Germans. During the 30 Years' War, they became victims of the Swedish army servicemen, mercenaries, or marauders. This method of torture went as follows. Through a funnel, the perpetrators would pour buckets of the most disgusting liquids imaginable into the victim's throat. They used everything from urine and filth to manure and feces. This was the Swedes' way of torturing the civilians, to force them to give up their money or food. Not only did the victims feel disgust and humiliation from being subjected to the Swedish drink, they also contracted deadly diseases. Furthermore, their stomachs stretched, causing horrific pain. The perpetrators would often use wooden planks to put pressure on the victim's bloated belly, or hit it with sticks to deepen the suffering. So, on the pain scale, the Swedish drink got 46 points out of the possible 140. Very often, one kind of torture ranged from public humiliation, accompanied by intense discomfort, to a death punishment with unbearable suffering. One of such hellish inventions was the cane. It's a large board consisting of two halves with a hole between them, used to keep the device on a person's neck. The cane wasn't secured in any way, so the culprit had to support the board with their hands and balance it while walking. To intensify the punishment, the person in a cane could also be chained, stopping them from ever sitting down. Moreover, the cane's parameters would change according to the severity of the punishment. It could weigh anywhere from 9 to 15 kilograms and have a square rectangular.
Yo, so you literally have to support yourself in the same. Oh yeah, that's annoying. Yeah, that's annoying, bro. When I go to bed and sleep, after 5 minutes, I need to turn around because I get annoyed in that same position. You try to put me in the same position for that long? Nah.
Disproportionate, irregular shape.
Nah.
Sometimes they were even double or triple. Often a cane would be so large that the victim would be unable to touch their face to eat or drink. If they weren't helped by those who cared, the victim would die a slow death of hunger and thirst. Yet the cane was also used as an execution device. The convict was placed inside a tall cage made specifically for this purpose. A cane would be secured above. Then, a prop would be taken from under the victim's feet, and they would slowly be strangled with the board on their neck. That's how people were executed in China as recently as 1900, suffering excruciating pain.
That's
on
brutal.
The pain scale, cane torture sits at 62 points. However, even this horror is far from being the worst thing people ever came up with.
It's gonna get so bad.
Europeans during the Middle Ages were especially creative in their acts of cruelty. It was then that they invented and actively used a contraption called the Judas Cradle. It's a spiky wooden or metal pyramid secured on a support with a...
Do not tell me that spiky thing goes up your ass, because this will be the worst one by far. Do not tell me you're forced to sit on it.
Special clamp over it. First, the victim's arms and legs were tied, and then their trunk was secured with a metal ring attached to the ceiling or the wall with ropes. After this, the person was slowly seated on the pyramid's sharp point. I
They were!
won't go into the horrific anatomical details.
Oh my God.
Since it's clear anyway that
Oh
the
my
process
God.
caused unbearable pain. Moreover, such torture could go on for anyway.
Hey. This time in your life is where being a prostitute or someone like that, someone that sleeps around, is a good thing. Cause if your ass stretches or your vagina stretches, you're chilling, bro. Cause you just slide down the motherfucker. You know what I mean? But yo, that would be horrible. That would be oh man.
That the process caused unbearable pain. Moreover, such torture could go on for days.
Oh.
If the executioners wanted to receive a confession or other information, but the victim remained silent, they tied weights to their arms and legs, causing the pyramid edges to gnaw at the poor person's body even more.
Oh.
As if that wasn't enough, the Judas Cradle was never cleaned, so it became the breeding ground for deadly bacteria. So, even if the victims managed to survive, they often died of infections. At any rate, they remained scarred physically and psychologically for the rest of their lives.
Yo, you'll never be able to shit again. Every time you need to go for a shit, it will just fly out. Your stomach will be like, okay, time for a poo, and then instantly. Oh, no. Oh, no, that's horrible. That is horrible.
That's why the Judas Cradle received 79 points on the pain scale, crossing the midpoint.
Your farts sound
However,
like a sigh.
the first device to go beyond 100 in our list is the Ubet. It's a horizontal tunnel with the only way out in the form of a grated opening above, used as a dungeon.
Okay.
Often, it was so narrow that the prisoners couldn't even sit down. Moreover, oubliettes were built right there in the castle so that the victims could hear human voices and smell the food, causing them even more psychological suffering.
That is teasing.
Yet, the real torture was the fact that the prisoners were literally forgotten about in these holes, and they slowly died of thirst, hunger, exhaustion, and infections. Compared to this, a Judas Cradle execution was a swift way to relieve one's suffering. The oubliette is a kind of immurement, which has been practiced since ancient times on all continents. In the Roman Empire, the most influential Vestals, who had broken their virginity pledge, were sentenced to death. It was against the law to shed their blood, though, so they were immured alive, fated for a slow, desperate death. If you think this insane practice remained in days past, you're wrong. In Mongolia, this barbaric execution method was still in use until at least 1913.
What?
So immurement in its different variations receives 108 points on the pain scale.
You're basically just burying people alive and just waiting for them to die by starvation.
But what if you're not alone in this closed space? Then it's an entirely different kind of punishment. Rat torture.
No, you can
As
eat the
far
rats.
back as in the 1st century AD, the cruelest emperor in the history of the Roman Empire, Nero, used rats to torture those who fell out of favor.
Eat them.
They say he put the victim into a barrel with hungry rats who quickly ate the person alive. In India, they made criminals wear wide pants, which were first tied around the ankles and then filled with rodents. Any ideas as to which body parts suffered the most and how painful it was? However, medieval torturers took it even further. They tied the victims down to immobilize them, then placed a bottomless cage on their abdomens and filled it with rats. Then they put hot wood coal on the grates.
Yeah, I've seen this movie before. Oh. Yo, chat, I ain't gonna lie though. We need to bring some of these back. Because I'm telling you right now, there'll be no crime. There'll be no crime. You think criminals are gonna go around doing crime, bro, when this is a possibility that it could happen to you? Nah. Nah, bro. Yo, this is vile. This is horrible.
The rats became unbearably hot.
This is horrible.
First, they tried gnawing at the cage in desperate attempts to escape. Later, though, the rats realized they were standing on a soft human body.
Yeah, Josh, but there'd be less crime, buddy. Huh? Josh, are you gonna go and rob a house, right? You got more chance of robbing a house knowing that, you know, if you get caught, you gotta do a couple years in prison, yeah? But if you're gonna get eaten alive by rats, are you even gonna attempt it? Nope, you're not. And if you say you are, you're fucking lying, okay? You're lying, bro.
And started eating their way out through it. Sometimes the cage was put on the victim's head near the mouth or other body parts. I'll let your imagination fill in the details. The most horrible thing is probably the fact that in South American countries, rat torture was in use until the 1980s.
What?
It received 112 points on the pain scale. It would seem that there's nothing worse than this. But before we get to the most horrifying tortures that scored the maximum of 140 points, there are still 2 more devices, the first of which is the rack. This is another deadly invention of the Middle Ages. It looked like a wooden frame with rollers on both ends. The person's limbs were tied to them, and when the torturers would start turning the rollers, the victim's arms and legs would stretch in different directions. This caused unbearable pain due to joint displacement, muscle and ligament ruptures, and, in the most horrific cases, even bone fractures.
Holy fuck.
The executioners could torture the victim like this for hours or even days to beat the confession or the necessary information out of them. Sometimes, a specifically trained person would supervise the victim's condition to keep them conscious and alive before a specific time. So, it's unsurprising that just threatening someone to send them to the rack would often be enough to obtain—
Mate, Bewitch, that would only be a good stretch for the first 10 seconds. And then beyond that, it's no longer a stretch. No longer.
—the necessary information. This horrible type of torture received 116 points on the pain scale. However, citizens of ancient Greece managed to outperform even the cruelty of medieval European torturers, being the creators of one of history's most terrifying torture devices, the Brazen Bull.
The Brazen Bull.
According to stories, it was built by an Athenian named Perilos as a commission for a Sicilian tyrant, Phalaris, in the 16th century BC. It was a hollow copper statue of a bull with a hatch on its side. A person would be pushed inside, the hatch would be shut, and then the torturers would start a fire under the bull's belly.
Oh, fuck.
Furthermore,
no.
The statue's nostril structure made the victim's scream sound like the bull's bellow. Yet this barbarism was apparently not enough. So after the execution, the victim's bones were used to make jewelry to then be sold on markets. The inventor of this hellish machine realized very quickly that doing business with tyrants was a bad idea, since the first person Phalaris tried out the Brazen Bull on was Perilos himself. First, the man's skin started burning in the places where it touched the metal. Then, the hot air gradually burned his airways and lungs. He went on to slowly cook alive before choking to death or going unconscious. Before this, though, Perilos went through the agony that reached 130 points on the pain scale. Even this horror, though, won't compare to the fate of those sentenced to Lingchi. It's definitely one of the most barbaric—
Yeah, chat, I've actually heard and seen the Blood Eagle. I'm surprised that's not on here.
—punishments in humanity's entire history. And it hails from Asia. It was used in China, Vietnam, and Korea right until the early 20th century to punish perpetrators of the most heinous crimes like mass murder and high treason, as well as to eradicate the emperor's personal enemies. It comes as no surprise, since the victim would be tied to a pole in a crowded space to turn the execution into public humiliation. Then, a few torturers would slowly cut pieces of flesh out of the convict's arms, legs, and chest. We know from historical records that during Lingchi, the victim would suffer from 100 to 3,000 wounds. That's why this torture is also dubbed death by 1,000 cuts. Although the experts state that with such wounds, a person would most likely die within 20 minutes. Sometimes the families of the victims would bribe the executioners to inflict a deadly wound right away. This wouldn't remove the victim's physical pain, but it's worth remembering that for the Chinese, Lingchi was also a spiritual punishment. According to their beliefs, this disfigurement of the body wouldn't allow the victim to be whole and healthy in the afterlife. This horrific execution method officially remained in use in China until 1905. This type of torture received the most points on the pain scale.
That would be horrible.
140.
That would be fucking horrible.
I told you all this exclusively for educational purposes and to tickle your nerves. But I hope it didn't reach torture level.
Yeah,
if you enjoy experiencing extreme
I feel tortured, bro. Yo, that'd be horrible because, like, you know, with that, like cutting your skin and stuff, they know the right places to cut so you stay alive the longest. You know what I mean?